Hey, Star Trek and Canon, written by humans, not the prophets. Today on a blank piece of paper. How wonderful. Yes. No, today on Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you right from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 and points beyond. Yeah. Interesting time this week. Just a point to remember that Star Trek and its canon was written by humans, not the prophets. What do I mean by that? Hang on just a second. I just want to say hello to all of our TTLers out there. If you're a regular viewer with us Tuesday or occasional, welcome back, welcome back. We've got the chat line going here, whatever platform you're on, and I want to give a shout out to our YouTubers and even our Twitch folk. But I will really get to the Q&A after our break today, okay? If you're new to watching Tuesdays Live, if you found yourself here, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to talk for a minute here on my little soapbox for a second, and then we'll take a midway break, and then I'll come back, do the Parrot Analytics streaming TV ratings for the week, and spend most of the time on some Q&A after our midway break, okay? So hang on for that, especially you YouTubers. Everyone now should be able to see all the comments from every platform. At least I know that's for sure for YouTube and Twitch. So you know where we're coming from. And yeah, welcome all you new folk. And I will take a look here. I've got some, you'll tell I keep tweaking the tech here. It's 2020. That's one good thing about lockdown. So I'm going to welcome everybody. And if you're seeing us on YouTube live for the first time, or if you're seeing us on YouTube later, welcome, welcome, welcome. There's a whole archive on Facebook. It is slowly coming to YouTube. It's only been the last, month or so that you can find on YouTube as well. But this is show number 165. I've done this every week with 2 weeks of break. So, hey, everybody, yes. Welcome to Trekland. Welcome to Trekland Tuesdays Live. My topic this week comes up again every so often, and it's like so much in Star Trek. It's the penalty for having been around for a while. You get the luxury, you make the mistake. As much as I preach about watch out for the blinders, watch out for the rut you get into, well, in fandom as well as in life. You forget that the world is changing. You forget that things have altered the perception for other people who come along later. 2020 is not 2005. It ain't 1987, and it sure as hell ain't 1968 or 1975, or pick a year. Everyone's coming to Star Trek at different times in their own life, but also at a different time in the world. And I don't just mean social upheaval or social snoozdom. I mean, what's going on in the franchise itself? Is there active production? Is there not? Are we in a fallow time? Is licensing got its shit together? Or is it all over the place? Or does it care? Or does it really care? Or does it care in a bad way? I mean, all those factors affect what's coloring us on our Star Trek. So it's been fun as we sit here and face the prospect of, yes, 23 straight weeks of new Star Trek. Between the 10 weeks of Lower Decks and 13 weeks of Discovery now, right after that, coming in October. We're a week away from the start from the lower. Yes, I know, global folks. I know we can talk about this later. I know no one has a clue where Lower Decks will be outside the U.S. and Canada. I'm sorry. Some of you may have your ways of seeing it, but otherwise, yes, I know. And as a moneymaker for CBS All Access, you would think, you know they're bearing down on a contract. They're trying to get it out there as soon as they can. It's not they don't want to make the money and distribute the franchise. We'll see what happens on that front. But then, Discovery Season 3 now coming along mid-October for 13 straight weeks, getting us into the new year. We'll see what coronavirus and the lockdown production delays are doing by then. You would think that the animations now, prodigy, finally we can say the term out loud. I don't have to keep saying #NickTrek, but there it is. You would think the animateds would come along better than the live action. We'll see what that does. You'll see what that does. But my point here is, I got into a couple of Twitter threads this week where people of all things were circling back to Uh, well, the difference in not Star Trek '09, but in the Star Trek '09 Countdown comic, and talking about how the Romulan supernova was finally retconned. It was very sloppy, very goofily handled. People were not, you could tell that people didn't get what background meant to Star Trek folks because it affects the story. Once you start pulling the threads of the tapestry out, it does affect the story. It's not just some goofy thing on the side that 4 nerds out of 4 billion are going to care about. It really does affect the story integrity and logic. Even if you throw one line at something, it doesn't have to hijack the whole movie for the sense of, background bozos. It should be there. So one of the inherent logic problems that was very fuzzy in '09 was retconned, was gap smoothed by 2 of the shows. In fact, the 2 of the Supreme Court that put out the Kelvin movies back when they were writing together, Bob and Alex, Orsi and Kurtzman themselves, actually oversaw the Countdown comic that fixed. They did a very wonderful fan jobish, if I do say so myself, that we did for over the years, of trying to fix the holes. With the whole thing about naming the Hobus supernova, yada yada, that it was a subspace shockwave supernova, which is why it had these bizarre and far-flung properties, way beyond those of mortal supernovas. Far beyond, I should say. And then along comes Picard, which changes the background. Oh, it's not this other star named Hobus that was affecting huge chunks of the known local space galaxy. No, it was just the Romulan star affecting the Romulan system. And oh, look, we're taking, not only is Earth and the core worlds of the Federation not at risk, but there are other Romulan Empire worlds and border areas where refugees can be taken to. So that's the whole thrust of Picard. So yeah, that needed to go away. And it's like, that's fine. I'm watching it going, oh, okay, that's fine. Oh, well, we did Stellar Cartography, the original edition, and this with the eve of Hobus being our deciding point, because there was so little background at the time beyond that was a safe place to stop. Most of the known world before that upheaval, astrometric, logistical, and then social, cultural, political, we didn't know about. So we were trying to do the known thing there. We took that as our point. So now that has to be redone. We'll go back and change those sections because now we have, what I'm getting to here, bottom line is, we have gone from what I called years ago, this is another Dr. Trek phrase, what I call canon in a vacuum, and now we've got aired canon. Now years ago, and I mean years ago, kids, when there were like 8 of us in the country that I felt cared about this in stamp and paper days, we got it. There were 79 episodes, and even with a movie every couple of years, the maddening gaps in canon that we wanted, that we needed to know, and I wasn't even a gamer. Gamers need it all. But even just what we wanted to know as background nerds was not there, right? We got little bits of it, we got more about Federation politics and how the thing was structured. Oh, look, the president's office is in Paris. Thank you, Star Trek VI, right? Oh, that's what the Federation Council room looks like. Thank you, Star Trek IV. Okay, some things just need a movie budget, even if it's a chintzy little dinky movie budget. And Herman Zimmerman is a hero for recreating and redressing and repurposing things. Point here is that in the slow days, we had to come up with things to fill our maddening gaps. It started for me with this sucker. And yes, this is my binder version. And if you're a veteran of the short-lived but eventually returned nonfiction Fridays that we had during Corona time, you saw me talk about this. My tech manual, my original series tech manual, is in a binder so I could take the pages out. That's what I did. But I'm talking about back in the day, people were shocked, and people forget about this. In the middle of all the phaser diagrams and the infamous Franz Joseph, dreadnought ships, all of that, Franz Joseph did try to set out a version of the galaxy and where the Federation, Klingons, and Romulans fit into it. Okay? People forget that. That was 74 because we had no clue from anyone on the aired episodes. Original series didn't go here. They threw out quadrant like it was a sector and sector like it was a quadrant. Yeah, we've had to kind of smooth that over. My point here is inquiring minds want to know. And that attracted my attention as much as gap filling anything else, which led to the infamous maps that I worked on to fill this out that never got published, but I have the pasteboards over there because this came along in 1979, the last non-pocketbooks nonfiction until the recent years. On the eve of the motion picture came out, long story here, but another attempt to put a scale to the maps, right? Well, that was all of these versions. Nothing is on film. It's fans, the brain trust, the smarts, the people that can finagle their way into a professional contract that's licensed, but not canon. That wonderful concept we have in Star Trek that drives people crazy, but it's because it's the way the world is. It's what you have to do. Until you get to the third season, Next Generation, the show, the actual show, needs some kind of galactic bearing, and Mike Okuda comes up with the quadrant system for the price, which leads to the inclusion of now in-house memos, in-house discussion. Now there's a continuity. Even though it's not on screen, it's used inside. We know we have the quadrants, and we eventually know the Borger and the Delta quadrant. The Gamma has been unexplored at all. And even though it's not on screen, the writers are using it. Not until some of the graphics start showing up for Voyager with our Delta back home thing. Thank you, Jeff Mandel, who was also the guy working the last couple of years of Voyager and the first year of Enterprise, and finally put out the star charts, which canonizes everything that had been on air into a paper format, just in a tiny, unposterable format, with people taking this out and scanning it and connecting it. Until we had the chance, the honor and the pleasure to work on the star charts, the stellar cartography charts, and update even more all of Enterprise and the prime slice, yes, I said the prime slice of the prologue for Star Trek '09, which at the time felt very uncomfortable. Blowing up Romulus, and don't worry about Vulcan. It's in the Kelvin universe. It's the fake world. No one cares. I mean, I would have cared if I had been led to care, but if we only get 6 hours in the big picture, why am I supposed to care? 6 hours on film. A lot of people are thrilled by the Kelvin timeline. Power to you. Go to it. You have as much right to enjoy and explore the Kelvin timeline as you do the Klingon War timeline from yesterday's Enterprise, or heaven forbid, the Mirror Universe. So go to it, kiddos. But the prime timeline, where 700 and bearing down on 800 hours has been invested, that people care about because there's so many connections there. That's where things happen. And the other ones are nice for vacations, for contrast. But the prime timeline did not get that kind of scope, right? So back to my conversation the other day. This person gets it, but they were upset that now the Hobus backstory to the Romulan upheaval as the supernova source has to be from Countdown comic. They didn't mention stellar cartography, but stellar cartography and other sources now have to be either scrubbed and reworked or just put on the sidelines in the dustbin of history. That has to be changed in light of the Romulan sun being the source, and the whole scope of the crisis. And you know what I say? That's fine. That's nothing to be upset about. We're back to my title. It's inevitable because it's human. Star Trek and canon are written by humans who exist on a lineal existence. Because no, our creators of Star Trek and us, we're not the prophets. We don't see all points in time equally. We don't know when we're creating, we're busting our butts and our balls, if we have them, to try to keep some semblance of continuity, even more than any other space show set in the future has ever tried to do before. Where no logically projected science, non-anthology, regular series, science fiction, ship-based space show has gone before. Reading infamous Bob Justman, Dorothy Fontana, Gene Kuhn, Gene Roddenberry, Herb Solow memos. They're trying their best to keep a show together like it's never been done before, and still making mistakes, having gaps, having no idea what's going to come back to haunt them in 10 or 20 years, much less 50. But having the sense that the inspiration that their little creation brought has led to people along the way being inspired to keep bearing that torch. Even when, at times, people in their enthusiasm for Star Trek, if not to make a buck also, people in their enthusiasm and creative energy maybe got a little adrift. Not that all choices aren't worthwhile, but that eventually somebody's going to come back and deal with a problematic choice, conceptually or visually. And you know what? It always gets done. But the other side of the coin is the gaps, because not every Star Trek entity, you can only do so much in a 2-hour movie, much less a 178-hour series over 7 years. You can't do everything. So it gets filled in bit by bit. In the here and now, because we're not prophets, we need our stuff done now. That goes for 15-year-old me or me of 2020. Here's another example. I mentioned gamers. Look, guys, there was an original role-play game. When role-play gaming got big in the 70s, it was, 10 years into Star Trek. I mentioned these the other day, somewhere else I was talking on camera, but I found it. Here is my original Heritage model lead figures. There's a McCoy in there. It's Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and a nameplate. Okay, if you want to role-play and have a lead figure for an actual character and not one of your own, or use this as a stand-in, there you go. I never painted it. I never, yes, the box is open. The foam rubber is probably about to fall apart. But I had to buy the McCoy, of course. But that was the lead figures from probably, the late 70s. Point here is that was pre-FASA. But even when FASA came along, right? Here we go. When FASA came along, the original box starter set, yay! Gamers need details. Gamers have to have details to function. The game has to have, you have to anticipate things. A poor DM can't come up with everything on the run. If you're going to go into something like Star Trek, where A, so many people know it, it's not made, it's fiction, obviously, but so many people know that, but then B, I don't know if you've noticed this, but fans can disagree on even what's on screen, much less what's having to be made up to fill the gaps. Okay, so yay on FASA for going to another degree. As the 80s movies came out, they updated their books. They expanded the Federation. They got into the Monster Maroon era. They updated from Kirk's time another 20 or 30 years. They expanded it beautifully, came up with all kinds of material, even with a 2-hour movie bopping along that got their own source books. They still needed far more material than any movie could provide. All of this, obviously, is what I called canon in a vacuum. And by that I mean, it's canon that somebody is coming up with. Comic book writers, authors, novels, background authors, fans, gaming companies, licensees obviously would get licensees of anything would get the first dibs. Creators who run out and write a Jerry Taylor novel, a Gene Roddenberry novelization, an Orsi and Kurtzman comic book. That gets there. Somewhere along the way in the 70s and 80s, this all made perfect sense to me. And I started trying to explain it to people as Tier 1 canon on screen, Tier 2, what the creators do in their spare time, as well as Tier 3, like licensed work canon. And then Tier 4 is hopefully what the little 8 or 10 of us in the whole country that seem to care about this stuff, what we were saying and getting published, because then if they were lucky and if someone thought it was respectable, the Tier 4 committee of Canon people, fans that cared about it, that had the correspondence, got a contract to be published and moved up to tier 3. And then when 20 years go by, your Ron Moores and your Renee Echeverias and your Brian Fullers get to be real professionals and put it on screen. Or like Mike Sussman during Enterprise, take information out of old FASA game novels, game manuals, and stick it into Enterprise episodes. I'm looking at you, Andorian Fighting Cleaver, that I've temporarily forgotten the name of. All of this is to say, famously topped by, all of this is to say what happens when the world changes. Now, we famously had a world change, had a universe change in 2005. Active Star Trek production that had been around for 18 years goes away. Even the movie era, even before Next Generation brought series back, we'd had the guarantee-ish of a movie every couple of years because they didn't absolutely stinking bomb. So since 1979 and then 82, there had been a promise of Star Trek at least every couple of years, if not every week, until 2005. And then we were in the great Star Trek desert. Within a year, the promise of a J.J. Kelvin movie, whatever the hell that would wind up being, we didn't know what it was at the time, but something was coming. But even then, I tried to preach. 2 hours is not 26 hours a year, guys. Enjoy it. Hopefully it's great, but it will not be the same. We're in a fallow time. And into that fallow time, much was done. The pocket novel line came. That's another side that's being tweaked and retconned now with the coming of Picard. And yes, even with Star Trek 09, a comic book to fill the gaps of what the movie didn't get to. Not to help you understand. I mean, there are those times when people say, I don't want to have to read the novel to understand the movie. We're not on that level. We're talking about Star Trek universe, Star Trek canon background. But that happened in 87. The times we have a pressure point, the times we have a cleaving, is when we bop along and we bitch and moan and pray for new Star Trek in a fallow time or a new level. And then we get it. And part of the reason for the friction point is everybody had carried along what we now call headcanon for so many years to fill in the gaps that the minute we have, especially when we have new people, but even if it's the old people doing new Star Trek, it's going to be by nature be in a different cauldron until everything smooths out over time. I'm saying this motion picture threw some people, but boy, Wrath of Khan actually threw a lot of people. Me too. I hated that brass, all that militarism in the uniforms. Oh my God, that's not what Gene wanted. But you know, it's what we got. You can sound off. But it also plays out in different ways. Remember the FASA gaming? A new movie every 2 years, right? Get a new source book, expand the writing. Merrily going along, the FASA team comes and goes, merrily pumping out the detail that gamers need now to play games in the Monster Maroon era, right? It's 20 years after the original series. Now we're in the 2280s. Okay, fine. Here's some material. Oh, look, it's a new series coming. It's 100 years. It's 78 years later, technically. 78 years later. Let's get our advanced material, because we're a licensee, and do a game manual for this era too, the way we've been doing for 10 years. Yay! Here it is. It comes out. Whoa! We have a series in production. We have a series cranking out our stories every week. All of a sudden, it's a whole new ballgame. No one bothered to tell FASA this, but this is what happens. They got caught in the crossfire. What happens to all kinds of iterations happen when, look out for what you wish for, Lieutenant. You may get it. And we got Star Trek back in 87, and we got a new manual to handle it from FASA that's this thick. And within a month, Gene Roddenberry and staff are saying, whoa, wait, this isn't canon. And they're not being snobby. What they're saying is, you have come up with so much detail, filling gaps. We're doing stories every week. We can't match this. We're the prime source of the franchise. You're a spin-off. And you're going to confuse our fans. We're going to conflict. And if there's anybody going to call the shots, it's us, not some game company. So whoa, back up. They would have loved to have recalled these like a Mary Trump book. But instead, within a few months, not with artwork, not with, artwork like this, but eventually with stills and licensed reference, whatever artwork. And we're talking first season, Next Generation, barely into the second season. There's not a lot. There's not a lot after 7 seasons, but relatively for a whole universe. Along comes it's not the officer's manual, it's the first year source book. Very humble, very reduced in scope, with the promise of there will be more years to come. And, a few photos, but everything in here is, all those ships, all those ships, everything is reduced to what is now canon. The Ferengis, the Romulan War, the Klingon, everything you saw on screen for the first year and a half is now in here, and nothing more. So, gamers at the time, were confused. I don't know, it's the late 80s, computer gaming is coming along, tabletop, paper and dice, as I used to call it, game. But my point is that there is a schism, there is a friction point, there is a pivot point where what you did to get by, canon in a vacuum, has to give way for sanity's sake. There is no committee of 47 sitting around doing it. Would be great. People have tried it. Other franchises and startup franchises have tried it. Right now, we're living at a time. Brian's biggest legacy may have been to have Kirsten Beyer on the staff in the writer's room at Voyager. The biggest legacy there might be having Kirsten and, by extension, a tighter coordination than ever before. But we've already seen novel factoids early in Discovery, early in Picard. The early books necessarily have to be changed, just as Jerry Taylor's book was supposed to stand for all time as Janeway's background. But in the real world, people come, people go. Administrations change. Showrunners change. People under them change. We're human. We're not the prophets. Hobus and the scope of that shockwave supernova was retcon explained to explain the events of '09. Here's Picard. It's changed it's changed some of the on-screen story points that the whole Countdown retcon was trying to smooth out and fix and explain. As did Star Trek Online, but the whole thing being not only a bizarre subspace shockwave supernova, but a plot by an alien entity, and not an organic, natural phenomenon, which would explain a lot toward even the retcon explanation. But is that what's going to hold up in Picard? Or are we just going to go back and have to smooth out the stupidness of the plot holes of '09 in a different way? Well, it's happened before. You can't have a 53-year-old, 54-year-old, 55-year-old franchise that people still find reasons to care about, that people still find reasons to keep adding on to, and occasionally reimagining what happened before. You can't do that without having some hiccups, without stubbing your toe along the way. The guys and gals in the 60s and in the 80s and in the 90s, they weren't prophets. They didn't know all points of existence at all times. They're just stuck on a poor little linear time stream, just like we are, and just like most of our Starfleet heroes and friends. So this is going to happen. It's going to happen again. As much as people, try to anticipate, the gaps are going to get filled in a way different than someone didn't postulate. Now, I'm not talking about on-screen head bashes of canon, of mistakes, if you want to call it that, errors. Basically, when something is postulated or seen that conflicts with something we saw before. And sometimes those are hard to do. Sometimes you just have to have the test of time. Sometimes you have to say, John D.F. Black thought that the United Earth Space Probe Agency made sense, use SPA, in those first couple of shows. And midway through the year, Gene Kuhn thought, oh my God, that's way too much of a mouthful. Let's just have the United Federation of Planets and let's have Starfleet. Thank you, Gene Kuhn. Do we totally... And for years, people just kind of tried to ignore that whole USPA thing. And over time, the amount of usage, clearly Starfleet and the UFP usages, the Federation, vastly outweigh one full use and one acronym pronunciation, right? But still, it's Star Trek. They're there. We got to explain it. And over the comfort of time, we come up with the idea, and it's somewhere in Jeff Mandel's troop, the New York Star Trek Mafia, and Doug's group, come up with USPA being an early pre-word. Okay, fine. Which is why USPA winds up being on Freedom 1, the missile that we see at the end of Voyager, and why you see USPA pennants and decorations all over the place for Enterprise, which is pre-Federation United Earth. And it even gets filled in. So hold on to your panties. Even when there are mistakes in evolution, the evolving idea wins out. Happened in the maps. People love that season 1 3D view that Mike Okuda did. And so many of our friends at Memory Alpha hung onto that for dear life because it was so big and bold and clear. But eventually, the weight of the evolution of where everyone decided things have to go, should go, outweighs that. And you come up with that being an artistic rendition. You come up with that being not a what do you call it? A literal interpretation, but it's an artistic rendering. Same thing we do with the DS9 battle maps. Very few of them make no sense. Mike and Doug, much less Ira and the writers, had no clue where the logistics of the Dominion War wound up being. They knew the basic layout of the empires. But thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for laying in so much detail. And then thank you all for giving me the opportunity to choreograph the Dominion War and find a couple of keys that actually made it make sense. How could Earth and Vulcan and the homeworlds be threatened by the Dominion if the action was happening way over here in the front lines of Cardassian Bajor? But that's what time gives you. So, everybody that gets so upset about canon and issues, canon is the guardrails. Canon is not a straitjacket. It's amazing. During the Star Trek 09 times, people were scared to write canon. We have to do alternate universes because it's too hard to write canon. There's so much of it, and I'm a creative, and it's an anchor. It's an ox yoke around my neck. And at the time, I had hashtag canon is not hard. Now, everybody is terrified that canon is, there's too much of it, and the conflicts are ringing out. Chill. Half of this is about gap filling from non-official sources anyway. Let's be thrilled it's on screen. Let's be thrilled something is on screen. And let's be patient here as a new generation ramps up and gets its feet wet, gets its space legs doing this. When there is a conflict, let's go back and look at the earlier bits and see what the conflict really is. Can we smooth it out? Can we do what I call hashtag texture, not trivia? Can we see that things can be not mistakes, but exceptions? Actors are told all the time to go against the grain. If the predominant tone of the piece you're in is a drama, find the funny moments, find the comic moments. If it's a comedy, find the dramatic moments. That's what real life is. Real life isn't one big, Play-Doh fun factory form. There's all kinds of exceptions to every kind of norm. And that's what brings us sanity in Star Trek. Hashtag texture, not trivia. At the same time, hashtag canon is not hard. And at the same time, we're going to gap fill the way we need to gap fill. We're going to have hashtag canon in a vacuum until we don't need it. And then for sanity's sake, Now we've got something. Now we've got a shared common point. And you know what? Along the way, I go back to the lovely, lovely, now they'd be shippers, but the lovely, lovely Spock fans in the 70s, in the 80s, who were still pissed about Spock's portrayal in third season, in Enterprise Incident, in Cloudminders. The way Spock talked to Droxine about his sexual nature, they were flirting in a very weird, mental way, elitist, intellectual way. And also Spock and the Romulan commander's actions and their interaction, obvious flirtation, obvious romantic attraction in an alien Romulan Vulcan way. Both cases pissed off the original generation of a lot of them, of Spock fans. All that original fanzine generation were so pissed to the point where they say, we don't accept the third season. Freddie Freiberger is an idiot, and we don't accept the third season. Forget the fact that Enterprise Incident was written by Dorothy Fontana. Through a couple of hoops, obviously, of rewriting. But I'm just saying, it's been around for forever. People have been upset by things. You know what? Last time I checked, it is still a free country, and you can go off, you can fanzine, you can meme, you can fan film, you can do whatever you want to your heart's content with whatever iteration, whatever little thing you feel aggrieved about, whatever you loved that now seems like it's been steamrolled. Go to it. But we got to have some common ground. Canon is just common ground. It's just the guardrails. We have to know where we are. We have to know the rules so we know what we're doing when we do have to break one. And at what point does a broken rule become the new rule? It's an ongoing process. It's been happening for 55 years. Other franchises would love to have what Star Trek has. This is what, to me, makes Star Trek different than anything else. With maybe the exception of Doctor Who, because Doctor Who, after they made their first iteration, was the DNA of Doctor Who was constant change. Conceptually not. But in every other respect, yeah, it will always be fresh faces doing new things. Everybody else, especially those not blessed to have started on film, when they hit film, are going to be, when they're not, they're going to be rebooted. Star Trek is the only one. The pivot point there, the inflection point was '09. If '09 had been a reboot, then Katie barred the door. Star Trek is just like every other franchise. You know, you get a new Batman every 2 years. You might get a new Spider-Man every 2 years. Star Wars keeps up, but then they have conceptual issues, leadership issues, and sticking with a movie franchise and not knowing what to do with its extended universe and chucking it all in mass, that's their issue. Nobody else has been like Star Trek for 54 years, which is why I say it wasn't planned that way. It just was inherently what the creators and what we have done with Star Trek and our expectation. That's why people get upset. That's why I try to have patience with folks. That's why I try to find a reason to texture, not trivia, everything up to a certain point. Smart holograms in the 2260s. Okay, in the 2250s. That's what I try not to get panties in a wad. And when you have something that's insurmountable, rather than scream and wail and collapse and leave fandom, leave Star Trek, the challenge is to take that oddity, wherever it comes from, and find a way to make it fit, even if you find a way to make it fit by not having it fit. This is why we go to the moon and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Okay. When it gets to my JFK impersonation, I think that's time for today. Anyway, as we are about to be blessed with 23 straight weeks of new Star Trek, different tones, different times, and I've got this wild, wild feeling that Discovery might finally find itself as a series. We're about to unleash a lot of new ideas and a new look at some old ones in a new vibe. Yeah, animated. But come on, weren't you impressed that so many details are there visually in Lower Decks? Come on. This is why it took 2 years. Good on Mike. Good on Mike McMahon. But as we're about to go down this path, there's going to be a lot of challenges to people's headcanons come along the way. It's not new. It's not only is it not new, it's healthy. It's healthy. And you know what? It's just going to give all of us Trek historians another little layer to go back to in 20 years and tell, oh no, in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, people thought this. Really? Yes, really. I hope we're around in 20 years to be doing that. I hope Star Trek is still around in 20 years to be doing that. As the weight of the years piles up and our self-awareness can grow, you know, the meta of all of this that wasn't available in earlier times, that's just adding more to the soup. I can't wait to get into our questions. I know Twitchers, you think I'm ignoring you. I hope you see the other questions going by. Just one more thank you shout out here at the end. I didn't thank our Patreons. I'm going to say some thank yous here and some goodbyes. We'll take a quick break and then I'll be back and we will hit the parrot analytics. That was a little longer than I'd normally go, but it seemed like it was a simple question, a simple concept that just balls up every so often. And you know, on the eve of New Trek, it seemed like a good time to talk about it. So, as always, if you are leaving us right now, I want to make sure you know that I do have a Patreon, and I want to thank all these folks for being our current Patreon folks. We have the TTL Club, Blaze K. Lawrence Todd and Blake Arledge, and our TTL Live Wires, which I finally got updated here in the last couple of weeks. So a big shout out to Rusty Harold and Jerry Cooper and Mr. Vestek, and Halbjorn Goodjohnson, and Jalen Bullock, and Gary Williams, who I left off here for far too long, and Robert McLean, and Eli Irvin, and I think we've got a couple more coming. It's the end of the month when Patreon updates, and we'll be back with some more of these folks. If you're not familiar with Patreon, it's this platform that lets folks help out their favorite creatives and whatever it is, art, music, drama, film, whatever, poetry, literature, graphic novels. Mine's very simple. Go to patreon.com/TreklandLive, $5, $10 a month. It's a shout out from me every week. Thank you very much. You've noticed that we're finally growing Tuesdays Live and everything Trekland video wise. The new video camera is this week that I can zoom with. I notice I'm not jumbling around here. I'm back to almost iPhone simplicity here. But, well, it doesn't take a pandemic to do that, but it helps. No, I'm not saying that. Anyway, and a big shout out to our $10 folks, our live wires, who I finally got caught up with the first generation of Proto 47 interviews that no one, including the Portales, has really seen unless they were around the first couple of years, 5 years ago. So thank you guys for Patreoning here. Of course, what I always say is if you really want to support the way I do things, our Trekland point of view, trying to add something that's not the same old to the internet explosion out there. There's so many new podcasts coming along, so many camera shows. We're at least not having a new toxic show jump up every day. A lot of good stuff is coming down the pike. More opinions, more viewpoints are wonderful. But I always try to find my own path here. So, yeah, this one wasn't such a bizarro topic this week. I tried to get a little more on the nose just because these canon discussions come back around. And it drives some people crazy when it's really just kind of simple if you let it breathe. As Grandpa Vanderhoff, and you can't take it with you, once said, life's kind of simple if you just relax. So, yeah. So, anyway, we'll be back after this break. But before we go, I just want to remind you that the new Trek Files is up at Roddenberry Network. Our Trek Files this week, we've got Jacqueline and Lichtenberg talk about first-generation fandom. Back to talk about all things from when Star Trek was new and is not as complicated as today, and yet they thought it was complicated. Anyway, some fun. Our document this week is a fun mail out of sources from Gene's office, and Jacqueline is back to talk about it, and a lot of her own fan fiction Spock adjacent world of Craith. Speaking of alternate takes and universes and holding on to your own view of things, Jacqueline's a perfect example of that back in the day and now. Check out the Trek Files on Facebook and, you know, all the other Roddenberry shows too. And every Saturday you can catch me and Dr. Trek and Dr. Ali Matu, one of us is a real doctor, on Life Support Live at 10 a.m. Saturday Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 British summertime, 7 Central European summertime. We have a new theme every week. You can go to our Facebook page and like it, as you could with Trek Files. And if you're there, you can talk to the Life Support Live family and vote every week on our theme. The theme will be up tonight, our recommended theme. We'll have several up there to vote on a poll. And join us. You Q&A in just like this, and also you can Skype in by phone and join us. That's a lot of fun. Otherwise, guys, if you're watching me right now on YouTube, at Larry Nemecek, that's my Twitter. Love for you to join me there, follow me. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'm late to the game trying to build my channel. We finally got over 1,000 folks, and I forgot to even celebrate it. So I'll do that sometime this week. And if you're watching on Facebook, Larry Nemecek's Trekland, that's the moniker for Instagram, okay? And once again, portal47.net is where you can do this all the time with our private board. We mini-con all year long, no matter where your center seat is. And if you're one of those folks, if I've said anything today that's clicked in and given you the idea that maybe you're one of those fans that has no idea how much Star Trek you still have no idea about, well then, Portal 47 is the place for you. Go to portal47.net. Okay, that's going to be it for me for now. But I'm going to try yet another experiment this week as I do this. We will, how weird. Yeah, we will come back after the break. Give me just a second. And we will hit the Parrot Analytics, if you're with us still. And we will catch up with everyone's. I will back scroll, if you're new to this, back scroll everyone's questions and comments. I'm hoping maybe I generated a few, if not about my topic today, big picture on Canon and just take a breath. Maybe just about all the news coming out about Discovery Season 3 and Lower Decks and yada, yada, yada. I'm going to see if I can do this without